Hello guys, we are here with Alex Davy, one of the lead designers on X-Wing. If not, are you the lead designer at this point, would you say? Or is it you and Frank doing your thing, or?
Frank and I have been kind of co-designers since Wave 4. We sort of take responsibility for different projects, and actually, if you're curious, which of the sort of Lennon-McCartney thing worked more on a particular release, you can just look in the credits, and if Frank's name comes first, that was his baby, and if my name comes first, that was mine.
Awesome.
So
That's awesome.
Rebel Aces, it says, expansion designed by Frank Brooks and Alex Davy. Wave 5 says Alex Davy and Frank Brooks.
So we have you to thank for Wave 5.
Or to blame.
Or to blame.
As the case may be.
Or blame.
But we both work together on every project. Now Frank is working on the wave that is in development right now. Frank has been in charge of most of the Epic stuff, and I'm going to be working and will continue to work on Armada. So actually, Frank will probably be more involved in X-Wing going forward from here on. But we've got a lot of content in the can coming out that we both worked on. So
Nice.
Definitely a fun co-design situation. It's nice to have a partner and backup.
That's awesome.
And that's how it goes.
Well, you guys are doing a standout job.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
and we're at Worlds. Obviously, you just not only did you witness a long kind of 2-3 day period of X-Wing, but was judging, yelling the entire time.
Yes, we had no PA system. That's why my voice is so low and sultry right now. So I was shouting all weekend.
You were like, I would come up to you and we'd talk for a second, and you'd be like, "Hey, did you check out this crazy awesome list?" And I'd be like, "No, I haven't. Tell me about it." And you would. So to start us off, can you just give us kind of a rundown of some of the more interesting builds, maybe, or most
Sure.
interesting build that you saw at Worlds?
I think there were 3 builds that really caught my eye. And one of them, actually 2 of them we featured on Twitch, and the first game was amazing. It was Jeff Burling, who was the second place runner-up U.S. national champion this year.
Yeah.
He ran a crazy Millennium Falcon and Hawk 290 build, and it was like Chewbacca plus the robots, R2-D2, C-3PO, and he had a concussion missile
That's what blows
and
me
a
away.
whole upgrade. And all these things that you wouldn't expect. And then Jan Ors had like stealth device and squad leader and like a blaster turret of all things and a stack of focus tokens. with
So
the
what was
Moldy
up that
Crow.
list?
It was just weird. It was trying to skirt the edges of combat, juice up the Falcon with Jan's bonus die, and just throw big hits and take ships off the board over and over and over again. And with stealth device and a stack of focus tokens, Jan is agility 3. Naturally, or 4 if it's at range 3, and with a stack of focus to spend against every attack. So, like, shockingly durable Hawk 290.
Interesting.
And Chewbacca.
Well, you don't really
C3
want to shoot at that ship, right?
It's one of those games where it's like there's no really great choice because
Like
if you
spend all your
go
fire early on the Hawk,
Yep.
you leave a fat Falcon.
Yep. Exactly.
But if you go after the Falcon, then you have this impossible to hit Hawk.
Yep. And so what we saw in the Twitch game, which one of my favorite games I've ever seen, such a pleasure to check that out. We saw such a nail biter. We saw Chewbacca with 8 damage on him and a lot of flipped crits from R2-D2 just basically pull off a miracle against a very well flown rebel swarm kind of list. It was ridiculous. I mean, he had 1 hull left, and he was only alive because of hull upgrade. Of all of the improbable things to put on a Millennium Falcon, can you
That's
imagine?
it, the 1 extra help.
So, and he's great. He's first of all, he's like a billion feet tall, so you always can like find where he is and look at what weird list he's bringing. But he's a nice guy. He's fun to play against, and he always brings something totally bizarre. So that was a lot of fun. The other list, which kind of we had a sort of the polar opposite thing happen on Twitch, where we had a really cool list, but a really rough kind of unexciting and kind of demoralizing game for this particular list. But it was 4 bombers and with proximity mines, an Omicron group pilot, and Darth Vader. So another list that you would not expect to do well competitively, because I mean traditionally bombs have been poo-pooed. There are some recent changes to the way action bombs and overlapping works, which have helped them out immensely. And actually over the course of the weekend, Mark went 4-2 on both day 1 and day 2, and he just missed the cut for the finals both times. So over the course of the weekend, I mean, that bomber list was 8-4.
Wow.
Which is crazy,
Yeah.
and against
Yeah.
some really challenging players
Sure.
and tough lists. So that was a really cool one. And then there was another list that made it into the finals. Aaron Bonars, he calls it the Six Sigma Squadron. And I know Phantoms are a power ship, but you don't usually see the Stygium particle accelerator. You don't usually see the low-level one. So his list was 2 Sigma Squadron pilots, each with, I want to say, enhanced scopes, so they can move at pilot skill 0. They've got intelligent agent, so they can look at other people's dials. They've got Stygium particle accelerator, so they can get an evade token when they decloak. They can block. They can outmaneuver. And then the list is anchored by an Echo with advanced cloaking device, rebel captive, a bunch of, I don't remember the exact kit, but
man.
that's a list to look at because it's unconventional and extremely deadly, and it went down to another very strange Hawk plus Falcon list. So I saw a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
And one more list to mention, because it's on the face of it, it doesn't look particularly wild or bizarre, but Jonathan, he made it into, I think, the top 8, actually. Yeah. Top 8. He went down to Ira, but he had 3 B-Wings with Tactician and a Y-Wing with an ion cannon.
Yeah.
So that list, I think that's a beautiful list. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun to fly. It has incredible control options, and he was just expert at getting that range 2 shot. He would actually barrel roll out of range 1 to get that Tactician shot, which is awesome. I mean, he's denying himself a focus action or whatever. He's denying himself the extra attack die at range 1, and he's doing it because he knows that that's the play. That's the long-term play. And the game that he lost against Ira, Han had 1 or 2 damage left. And he had only lost, I think, at that point, 1 B-Wing. And on the last turn, he had a range 1 B-Wing shot lined up that could have taken Han out, but his B-Wing died before it could shoot, and that was the game. So a list that played fantastically well all weekend.
Jeez.
And just really joyful to see B-Wings and Y-Wings apply control pressure. Oh, and so yeah, if you watch that... If you watch the Twitch match where Mark's Bomber Swarm, it had rings run around it, and it went down to a really tough matchup. That B-Wing list I was just talking about, it took out Typo's list. It took down, it used stress, ion, control, and durability to slow Jan down, box her in, and delete her. So then it took a long time. It took a lot of careful play, but he had a lot of application of stress, but he slowed it down. He sprung a trap. He killed the Hawk, and he won that game and advanced to the next round of the. He advanced to the top 8. So that was cool. So a lot of cool lists. Those are the ones that struck me. I'm sure there were others, plenty of others. I watched maybe 1,000 games of X-Wing this weekend.
Yeah. So this is a lot of games, a huge sample size
Yes,
of the state of
absolutely.
X-Wing. So what would you say then about the state of the game, the state of the tournament scene right now for X-Wing?
In general, I feel great about it. I think I saw there was a ton of diversity. Some of that diversity narrowed as the matches got closer and closer and closer. But there were plenty of the dreaded Fat Han and the dreaded Falcon, Phantom plus Mini Swarm in the top 32. But every list was different. I don't think we had a single. I could be mistaken, but I don't believe we had. If we had 2 lists that were exactly the same, I would be surprised. There may have been
in the top 32.
In the top 32, there may have been 2 lists that flew a 60-point Han and a 40-point Jan in the top 32. That might have been the one thing that doubled up. But overall, I saw tons of diversity. I saw a lot of A-Wings competitively. I even saw a Darth Vader list, a TIE Advanced list make it, I think, 4-2 on one day, and bombers, coming back into the 4. So overall, I'm very happy with the way the diversity has shown up on these tables, and so yeah, I have no major complaints overall with what I'm seeing.
We'd be remiss if we didn't bring up the controversy
Yes.
of the weekend.
Yes.
Which was essentially the match with the Falcon Fortress, I guess is what we call it now, where they're just bumping into each other, and then the ships on the other side just flying back and forth.
Yep.
And they essentially just timed themselves out.
Yep.
More or less doing that for 70 minutes.
Yes.
Neither one of them wanting to kind of make that first move, and then at the very last second, the move was made, a ship was blown, a TIE fighter was blown up, time was called, match goes to that guy. So you see that as a designer, as a judge, as a player. What is your response to that? Maybe even to the community that's saying, "What's going on here? Like, this is broken. This is a problem." You know?
That's an excellent question. I'm actually glad to have an opportunity to talk about that. I watched that match very closely. Obviously, at that point, we were down to not that many tables to pay attention to, and we had 3 judges roaming around. So I saw very quickly what was going on. So for reference, if you're not familiar with this controversy, Richard Su is an excellent player. He plays a very traditional list. It's got Wedge Antilles, Biggs Darklighter, a rookie pilot, and Aaron Kraken, and various upgrade cards like Draw Their Fire and R2D2 on Wedge to try to keep this list alive. It's a lot of it's core wave 1 stuff, and it's a very good list, and he flies it very well. It has a lot of trouble against phantoms, and he was up against in the top 16. He's now up against a phantom and 4 tie list. So what he did was he set up sort of a fortress, if you will, in the corner, where all of his ships were sort of angled into each other, and all of their maneuvers would cause them to collide and remain in place. So they never move. So 4 ships sitting in the corner, never moving, and his opponent and roommate, as it turns out, which adds a sort of Jerry Springer-esque twist to the whole proceedings.
Who's the father?
They're friends, and so it was tough to see this play out in terms of, because neither of them was really loving this matchup to begin with. They knew that one of them was gonna be knocked out, so that's a tough situation to begin with. And so the other player had a great list and is a great player as well. And what we watched these 2 people not wanting to come to grips with each other, because the Phantom he just wanted those X-Wings to move out so he could outflank them, and the X-Wing player, Richard, knows that that's going to end in a loss for him almost all of the time. You've got to imagine they played against each other with these lists before a lot as well. So what we saw was this sort of fortress tactic. It's legal in the rules. Obviously, I got pulled over to watch the game, and there were questions like, is this acceptable? And it's not illegal. And I asked Richard after about 20 minutes of this had gone by and he hadn't moved. I'm like, Richard, tell me, do you have a plan here? Like, do you have, is this a strategy, or are you just, is this sort of a protest vote against this game? And he's like, no, I have a plan, and we'll see if it works. And I was like, well, this is a legal play, and we're going to see how it plays out. Obviously, not an interesting game to watch, except for the last 5 minutes, which were actually quite exciting.
Like, he's waiting for the last 5 minutes, and then you go.
Yeah.
Try to blow up 1 or 2 ships so you can get the point victory.
Yep. And so this is an example of a player who is using some fringe corner case rules, and who's using the time, and who's using the fact that it's a single elimination tournament to his advantage, and I think, frankly, quite cleverly. But I can understand why people are upset. I would liken this situation to, let's say you're playing in a high-level video game fighting game tournament like Street Fighter or Soul Calibur or whatever, and you just chain 7 throws together and then you do low kick 40 times and win the match. Yeah. It's not fun for your opponent. It's not fun to watch. People will call it cheesy, and no skill and that sort of thing. But the reality is, in high-level tournament play, and especially in single elimination, players are allowed to do whatever they think they can within the rules, and without stalling or slow playing. Because I should mention, Richard was not taking any time with his dials. It'd be like, done. So you had 2 players who are both not wanting to engage. But these sort of things, they don't make for good spectation. And they don't really. That's not really what the game was designed to do. It's a game of maneuver and flying around. So it's not super thematic to sit in a corner in with the park and the emergency brake on, waiting for these TIE fighters to come. But when you get to the top 16 at a World Finals, players are going to be among the best of the best, and they are going to do what they can. And so I don't think that I had really a problem with what Richard did in this particular instance, in this isolated case, because it was the only game in the whole tournament that he did this strategy. And in the very next game, he played a fast, clean excellent game against Keith's really well-flown TIE Swarm, and it came down to Aaron Kraken versus 2 Obsidians and Dark Curse. Huge of Richard to just take on a 7 TIE Swarm and do that well. He's a good player. I think what people really want to know, and I think what I'm concerned about as a designer, is this kind of tactic going to be dominant? Is this going to be something that people do regularly? Is this going to destroy the character and the great, thematic fun aspect of a fast motion, moving around, dogfighting game?
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me. So, my feelings are mixed. My heart goes out to Richard's opponent as well, because if it weren't for an extremely bad run of defense dice, he rolled 7 blanks on his ties. If it weren't for that, he would have won the game. Because the other thing to mention about this fortress is Richard did not have the initiative. So if the clock runs out, Richard loses. Sudden death, in the case of a tie, player with initiative is just out. So you know that Richard was not going to sit there the entire time. But I feel bad for his opponent, because his opponent finally saw what he thought was an opportunity to engage and ended up getting knocked out of the tournament for it. So there's really, I think, no real winner in that situation. I think that that's what drew a lot of the cries of bad sportsmanship, and I think that a lot of people are concerned that this is the future of X-Wing, and I can tell you very confidently this is not the future of X-Wing. In all my years of judging, I have seen Fortress Tactics only a handful of times, and this is the first time I've seen it pull off a win at a high-level event, and it was really down to a lot of good luck for Richard. I think if the dice had been average, Richard wouldn't have killed anything. He would have lost. The controversy may still be there, but I think it would be a little less extreme.
Yeah, certainly.
So I think that it's just something we're going to keep an eye on. We've known about it for a while. We've actually talked about it before with you guys about the fact that it is legal.
Yeah.
And I would like to explain from a design perspective what the reasons are that we haven't created some sort of rule in our tournament rules to restrict this sort of thing. And I think the reason for it is you have to be very careful that the cure is not worse than the disease. And I would describe fortressing as a mild cold at best. It's marginalia. It comes up so rarely, and this is the first time it's had a real high-profile effect on anything. But if it becomes more serious, if it becomes a serious illness, which I do not expect it to, I think then that would be the time to start discussing what to do about it. Because Frank and I have talked about this. How do you restrict this sort of thing? Do you say if all your ships don't move for 3 rounds, then you are eliminated? How do you make sure that is, what if it happens to just a fur ball and your stuff is just stuck? I watched Jonathan's game against Ira, and you had about 5 turns where everything bumped and everything stuck, and it wasn't because they were trying to do that. It's just what happens. So I think anytime you try to step in and curb something like this, you have to be very careful that the cure is not worse than what's the actual symptoms here. So I'm going to keep an eye on it, obviously. I understand people's feelings about it, and I'm sympathetic to both sides. But I don't anticipate it being a major issue. I think at this point it might be a bit of a storm in a teacup, but it's one of those things where it's not what we envisioned for the game, and we're going to keep an eye on it and absolutely understand why players are upset.
Nice. I think maybe people would want to know this, and whether or not you want to share it is up to you, but how engaged are you with the X-Wing community ultimately? Like, is this the kind of thing where you're designing in kind of this vacuum and then you release it and you watch the tournaments and then go back to design?
Yep.
Or are you active, like looking at stuff online, looking at what people are saying, that kind of thing?
I personally I would consider myself quite active, but not engaged.
Right.
I lurk on forums, I read things, I process information. Fantasy Flight Games has a policy against designers and employees commenting on our own forums,
Sure.
and in fact on any game forums. And I think it's a very wise policy, because no matter how good your intentions, engaging that directly with fans can lead to hurt feelings on both sides potentially, or maybe you misspeak. I don't think that there's a lot of percentage in trying to get out there and defend your own work. I think the work kind of has to stand on its own. You don't need me to tell me what you like and don't like about X-Wing. You don't need me to tell you what I think is and is good about the game. I like the community to decide how they feel about things. but I do like to know what's going on. I like to keep abreast of that sort of thing. And of course, I'm very interested in what people have to say. So I read a lot of stuff. So if you're posting on a forum, I might read it. I'm not going to say anything, but it'll go in here somewhere. It'll sink in, and we take that kind of thing into account. Active but passive. I'm not sure really how to describe that.
With it. I think a lot
I'm
of
there.
people
I'm
would
the
be
silent
nice
eye.
to know that.
Always watching.
Silent eye. Speaking eye would be kind of creepy. So you have a pretty balanced meta here at Worlds.
Fairly balanced. Yeah.
There's a little bit of concern, but there's a lot of diversity, which is good to see.
Yeah.
And this is without Wave 5 or 6, right?
Yes.
So how do you think Wave 5 and 6 are going to fit into the meta that you're seeing right now and shape, I guess, the Store Championship and regional season?
That's an excellent question, and my honest answer is I don't really have any idea. I think it's going to shake it up, though. So I can say one thing with certainty: it won't be the same meta.
Yeah.
Not even close. It won't even resemble it. Are we still going to see Falcons? Of course. Are we still going to see Phantoms? Of course. TIE Fighters? Yes. X-Wings? Who knows? A few here and there. But one thing is for sure: it's going to change things. And we are always looking at things and trying to make sure that one single tactic, one single strategy does not become dominant. If you look at the early days of X-Wing, I would say sort of halfway through Wave 1 all the way through Wave 3, the TIE Swarm was the list to beat.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are looking at the meta right now and saying, oh, there's no diversity. It's just Falcons and Phantoms. But I think the reality is there's a lot more diversity now than there was when it was half of the tournament is TIE Swarm, the other half of the tournament is XXBB, or whatever they thought could beat TIE Swarm, because that was the only list you had to counter. Yeah. That was the only thing you had to think about where you're like, well, what do I need to beat? Well, TIE Swarm.
Yeah.
If I could do that, I can probably beat just about anything else. So I think the game has evolved. I think it's more diverse now than it has been in the past. But we want that diversity, if anything, we want that diversity to grow. So if there is a concern right now, I think it is in the, is the 60-point Falcon so good that it's squeezing other builds out of the game? And I think that's a very valid concern. I think there are a number of reasons for that concern. So I'll break it down. Like the Falcon's been around since Wave 2, and it's always been a decent ship. But this is the first time it has won a major U.S. national event. Yeah. So this is the year of the Falcon, if ever there was one. And I think there's a few reasons for it. The first reason for it is time has gone by and players have gotten better. New strategies have emerged, and people have figured out how to use a turret ship with high maneuverability and boost with engine upgrade to great effect. So part of that is just growth. I mean, we didn't actually see the TIE Swarm. The TIE Swarm has been baked into the game since the core set, really, and since Wave 1 at least. And we did not see it in the first World Finals. Doug Kinney, great player, flew Darth Vader and won. But now if you were to look back at that, you would say, what is he thinking? Why didn't he just bring a 7 TIE Swarm with Hellrunner? So things take a while to evolve. So that's the number one reason. The number two reason, I think, is the introduction of the Z95 Headhunter. So you finally have a ship for the Rebels that is cheap filler, which has allowed it to have a 60-point piece on the board and enough ships to block things, to have enough firepower, to have enough. So the Rebels can now do what the Imperials have been able to do for a long time, which is build something they like and then throw the 12-point ship in there. Yeah. So we saw that in the finals. We saw that on Paul's build. So that's two reasons. The third reason, I think, is new upgrade cards that have improved the Falcon. I think nobody will be surprised when I say C-3PO is a power piece on this ship. Very clearly a strong thing. R2-D2 also very strong. And Gunner has been out since Wave 2, but I think people are now finally giving it the credence that it deserves. And Luke Skywalker, when that card came out, people thought it was terrible. But we're seeing a lot of that in high-level play. And the last reason, I think, is a more meta reason, a more contextual reason. People are afraid of the Phantom, and they want something that can deal with it, and the Falcon can do that. So you have all of these things swirling together, coming together and creating this monster. Yeah. And that's where we're at. The question is, where do we go forward from here? I don't think anybody wants to see one build be the build. And what I'm looking forward to seeing is how Wave 5 and Wave 6 affect things. So what I'm going to do 6 months from now, or what have you, after we've seen some store championships, we've seen some regionals, I'm going to analyze the state of the game at that point. After there are game elements that we have designed that have not been released that were specifically designed to combat this sort of list. Because this is not news to us that this is a good list.
Right.
Like, we've known about this list for 8-9 months, since this stuff first started trickling out, and since our playtesters gave us feedback about this sort of thing. So there are some hard counters coming out, and there are some things that I'm hoping will take the edge off a little bit. And there's a lot of uncertainty. You never know what people are going to build with the things that we release. And so we're gonna check in about 6 months or so after some things have had a chance to materialize, and we'll see what the state of the game is. Then I would not be surprised if it's completely different, and if that kind of list has fallen out of. I expect it will still be strong, but I would not be surprised if it has come down in popularity and more balance has come to the game. And if not, well, then we go from there, and we figure out a way to do that, whether through tournament rules, whether through possible card restrictions, or through just future waves content. So there's a lot of stuff we can do. We do pay very close attention to it, and I'm pretty confident that no one list will dominate this game.
Wicked.
Yeah,
I mean, it's important to note there's still only 4 waves out.
Yeah, that's true.
The amount of diversity for 4 releases is insane. It really is impressive. You look at the top 16 from both days, and there's how many of all of the cards have been used? At least one. The different upgrades, the different ships, the different pilots. It's phenomenal. So I think it's in a really great spot, and then you're introducing an entire new faction, all in one wave.
Yeah, we'll certainly let you get about your business, Alex. But the last thing that I would like to know about is Scum and Villainy as a whole, as a faction.
Yeah.
We've gotten some stuff now. We've seen some stuff out of that faction. We know more than we did at Gen Con, right? So where does that leave us with the Scum and Villainy faction as to what they're going to bring to X-Wing and why they were worth including in the game? Why that third faction was an exciting opportunity for you guys?
I think that's an excellent question, actually, and I think this may be the first time I have been asked, why does this exist?
Yeah.
We had this game. It was designed Rebels versus Imperials. That's the Star Wars that most people are the most familiar with. So who are these guys? What are they doing here? Why are they in my X-Wing? It's a great question.
Yeah,
Why are they in my X-Wing? Get out of my car.
What's Boba Fett doing in the back seat? That's not good.
Whoa, Boba.
My life has taken a dark turn. This is trouble.
I'm probably dead.
So that's a great question. And there are a lot of reasons, and I think a lot of good reasons. The primary reason, I think, is I truly believe that miniatures games function best when there are a multitude of factions, hopefully balanced factions, because you get, instead of having this kind of head-to-head, well, which is better, Rebels or Imperials, you have more of this kind of, rock, paper, scissors, or yin and yang. The more stuff is out there, and the more valid strategies there are, and the more uncertainty there is about what you're going to face, I feel like the more you're going to want to build a more balanced list that can try to deal with all threats. So that's one reason. Another reason is simply we wanted to keep the game going and do more ships. And there's a lot of ships that don't really fit into either the Rebel or Imperial side thematically. And we are able to do those ships now for a third faction and bring a lot of these cool vessels that people are fans of into the game in a logical way that makes more sense and is more in keeping with the theme of Star Wars. Another reason, this stuff's cool. Bounty hunters are cool. Let's face it. I think that's a legitimate reason. And I think one of the cool things about Star Wars is you really have 3 things going on in the original trilogy. You have this big struggle between the Empire and the Rebellion. Mm-hmm. You have the struggle between the light side and the dark side of the Force and the Sith and the Jedi. And then you have everybody on the borders of this conflict and how this conflict is affecting all of these criminal syndicates, Jabba the Hutt, the crime lords, smugglers, spies, people who did not want to necessarily be pulled into this, but were anyway by fate or circumstance or money. And so one of the most interesting things to me, I think, in Star Wars is what's on the margins. You know, you walk into the cantina in Mos Eisley, and there's all these crazy aliens,
Yeah.
and there's all these creepy, dark, criminal guys, and you look at them and you want to know what's their story.
Yeah.
What are they up to while all this is going on? You know, and then in Empire Strikes Back, you have this great scene where Darth Vader brings all of these weird-looking bounty hunters, criminals, to some extent, or certainly on the outskirts of the law, brings them onto a military vessel in full view of all of these military commanders and tells them, essentially, our dudes messed it up. We want you to go out and find Han Solo. And the tension there is great because you've got the line, you know, bounty hunters, we don't need that scum. And you've got this very palpable tension between the Imperials and these third faction outliers. And I know for me, myself personally, I looked at all of those guys standing on the deck of that Star Destroyer, and I wanted so desperately to know what happened to them, what they were up to, what is their backstory. So
They have awesome ships.
And they have awesome ships, yeah. Especially, yeah, it works. It's perfect for X-wing. And I have to say, personally, it's been an absolute privilege to design, you know, a new fire spray, IG-2000, one of the coolest, to my taste anyway, looking ships and characters.
Yeah.
And you know, I can't say what's coming, but I will say there's a lot of other cool bounty hunters and cool bounty hunter ships that we have available to us should we wish to produce them in the future for this game. So I think that's the reasons for the third faction, and I'm hoping that players will be as excited about it as I am.
Awesome, Alex.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you. It's
chatting
always
with us.
good to
We
talk to you
appreciate
guys.
it. And thank you guys for watching. This has been Worlds 2014. Alex Davy, one of the X-Wing designers. Happy to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
Stay tuned for more with X-Wing on the channel.